This is Dan Dix here, reporting for Press for Truth. Tensions are at an all-time high right now, and I'm not talking about Syria or North Korea or China or even Russia. I'm talking about right here in the West, and in particular in America. There seems to be a lot of tensions brewing right now, in particular, in regards to the alt-right and this Antifa far-left faction of the left. And it seems to me the oligarchy are sitting back laughing all the while as two sides are being played off against each other here, all for the purposes of control. Now, what if I were to tell you that there was a way to unrig the system, as it were, to kind of flip the script and put government back into the power of the hands of the people, the way it was meant to be originally? Well, joining me on the line today is the one and only Cynthia McKinney. She is in the middle of doing exactly that. Of course, Cynthia's been a congresswoman. She was in the state of Georgia for, I believe, 6 years, shaking things up in Washington, D.C. And I actually like to prefer to refer to her more of as an activist than a politician, because it almost seems like she has this uncanny ability to almost infiltrate these governmental institutions from the inside, not to take them down, but to change them and make them better. So, Cynthia, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today on Press for Truth.
Well, of course, I support Press for Truth. I support what you do. I support the the realistic journalism that you provide for your audience and the information that we all need in order to be better citizens of our country and in order to be able to unrig the system, as Donald Trump, as candidate, pointed out very well, that the system is rigged. People knew it for a very long time. People have encountered the rigged system in every aspect of their lives. But we haven't really had too many presidential candidates, particularly running under the banner of one of the two major parties, actually discussing the system as it is rigged. And so this was a breakthrough for some of us who have been saying for a very long time that the system is rigged. This was a breakthrough for those of us who understood that the people of the United States no longer control their own government. And so now it is incumbent upon us to try our best to unrig the system.
Well, the timing couldn't be any more perfect for this campaign, and I want you to break down specifically, the mission statement, the goals, the vision here. But before we get into the unrigged campaign, I'm curious of your thoughts about the current left-right divide we're seeing in America. I mean, it wasn't long ago that the events in Charlottesville, Virginia, transpired, and that got the whole world shook to their core. How did you see these events transpiring there? What were your initial views after witnessing what happened there?
Well, first of all, let me just say that it is my belief that people who self-identify as being on the left are being played. And the same goes for people who self-identify as being on the right. What I think some of us have realized for a very long time, particularly was brought into stark relief when many of the Republican elite abandoned the Republican Party and then went and joined the Hillary Clinton campaign. I think that spoke volumes about what really is left and what really is right. So basically what I think is that there's a new kind of nomenclature that's needed, because the divide isn't really about left and right. And so then maybe the divide is about what is right and what is wrong. And I believe that those people who left their Republican Party base and went to support Hillary, they give us an indication of those people who are warmongers, who are corrupt, who support corruption. And honestly, I haven't seen the level of corruption and usurpation of democracy as I witnessed with Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State and the Clinton Foundation. So when those two entities, I think defining the baselessness and the complete, utter, sheer lack of morality and ethics in governance as well as in our domestic as well as foreign policy, I think it's very clear that we need new nomenclature to identify these two sides. Okay, so with that having been said, then there's also one aspect that I think also needs to be maybe more clearly delineated. And that is that people have been saying, we want to take our country back. We want to take our country back. And that has been sort of a nebulous kind of desire or statement that's been out there without much definition. So what I am proposing through my particular vision of hashtag UNRIG is that we actually operationalize what it means to take the country back. One of the most important aspects of that is understanding the role of divide and conquer. So let me just say from the outset that this left-right divide seems eerily striking to me, to the same kind of East Coast, West Coast schism that was created in the Black Panther Party, and that was done purposefully by the FBI. We have all of the documentation from COINTELPRO to understand how the FBI created fractures not only within a particular organization, but also between and among organizations. So this divide and rule stratagem has been used successfully. And the story is told in COINTELPRO. So not only did COINTELPRO divide the Black Panther Party East Coast, West Coast, but for those who are in the younger generation who understand hip-hop and the fractures of hip-hop, also understand that there was this East Coast, West Coast phenomenon that basically ended up with the murder, I should say the as yet unsolved murder, of Tupac Shakur, who had threatened to take his, interesting, that just as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was on the verge of the Poor People's Campaign and having black people and white people converge on Washington, D.C. to cash that check that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had said had been bounced to the people, so too was Tupac, who had said that he would take his 6 million fans to Capitol Hill so that they could press for the changes that were needed in communities across the country. And if you look at the documentary about Tupac's life, this is very well spelled out in what became his realization that the problems encountered by his family were not familial problems only, that they were systemic. And that is because from community after community after community after community, as Tupac's family left from New York to Baltimore to across the country, eventually ending up in Marin County, what he witnessed was the same phenomenon across the entire country, which allowed him to view this as a systemic problem. And then you fast forward to 2016 and you've got candidate Donald Trump saying the system is rigged. Now, as someone who has participated in the rigging of the system, he would very well know that the system is rigged and how the system is rigged. So this provides us a unique opportunity to tackle the way in which the system is rigged. And in order to really do that, we've got to bring people out of their silos, out of the silo of the left, out of the silo of the identity politics, and into a common pot. where we don't leave those identities behind because the identities are important to us, but we sit down at a common table with our identities intact and with dignity, and then we sort out solutions to the problems that exist in the U.S. And that's what I propose for hashtag UNRIG. And I also would say that this is also a powerful opportunity, I believe, for us to test. As you know, I recently got my PhD, and my institution, Antioch University, which has a PhD in Leadership and Change, which is the PhD that I received in 2015, allowed me to study quite revolutionary material. And what I am proposing is that we apply through the process of action research, which is a relatively new methodology, the materials that I learned during my studies for my PhD. So, therefore, we know, say, for example, from Paulo Freire, who wrote the book Pedagogy of the Oppressed. We know that there are operative certain mechanisms of oppression. But at the same time, Paulo Freire also gave us tools for liberation. Now, one of those mechanisms of oppression was divide and rule. And to counter the divide and rule is unity for liberation. What that means is that we don't abandon who we are, we don't abandon our identities, we don't abandon our values. We bring our values to the table and we search for ways in which we can unite for the purpose of liberating us from those who would oppress us. Now, who exactly are those, in my estimation, are the ones that we need to keep our eyes on? While we're so busy, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s organization, the SCLC a long time ago had some bumper stickers that said, "Let us turn to each other and not on each other." So, I believe that we have to keep our eyes on the prize, another lesson that we learned from the Civil Rights Movement. And so keeping our eyes on the prize means understanding who's doing the manipulating, which is one of the Paulo Freire's other mechanisms of oppression, manipulation, and then another one was cultural invasion. And the cultural invasion occurs when the culture of hegemony and domination becomes so pervasive that we don't even realize that we're operating within it. So these are the problems that we have, and now we have an opportunity through hashtag UNRIG to tackle them according to the prescription that Paulo Freire gave us, and utilizing the methodologies, the appropriate research methodologies have been honed through years and years of testing and trial in the behavioral sciences.
Well, in terms of some of these manipulative techniques that the state is using, you mentioned the use of COINTELPRO back in the day. And for the viewers who don't know, this is quite literally the government infiltration of activist communities to infiltrate them and take them down, essentially. And if this is still happening to this day today, let's say with provocateurs, you know, on the left or the right, it would seem that, you know, it's almost like the clash is being generated on purpose. If COINTEL's shaking things up, if the government's shaking things up, it's almost like it's like this order out of chaos kind of mentality. It's like they're trying to, you know, create the divide so that they can offer their solution, which we know is going to be far different from the solution you are pushing for. Do you see it as a similar kind of tactic that they are going for in this order out of chaos mentality?
Well, of course, COINTELPRO never ended. The names changed, the the departments of jurisdiction change, but the process would never have changed. And I am pleased to remember having met the judge who presided over, I can't remember his name now, an Italian judge who was the one who presided over the Red Brigades and did an investigation. A terrorism judge did the investigation and surely enough discovered that the terrorism that had been carried out by the Red Brigades was actually carried out by the CIA. So let me say two things. One is that according to the research of David Cunningham, I believe it's cutting edge research that was done quite a while ago, because not very much research has been done on COINTELPRO, which I think in and of itself is a travesty, because here we have the government's own papers. And of course, I was forced to purge every mention of WikiLeaks from my dissertation, which is a form of censorship, but WikiLeaks provides us raw data from the government about how the government actually operates. And so I believe that WikiLeaks, like the COINTELPRO papers, both of them together, are invaluable tools for research. Not enough research has been done. But David Cunningham found in his research that infiltration was the favorite tactic of the FBI during the COINTELPRO era. Now, why was it the favorite tactic? Because it worked. And so if you look back at those people who were supposed to carry out a particular role in an organization, you find out that maybe even the founders remember On Common Ground, which is an organization, was a grassroots organization that arose after Hurricane Katrina, brought lots of hundreds, maybe even thousands of young people into the New Orleans area to help the victims rebuild where the government was totally absent. As it turned out, that the co-founder, one of the two co-founders, one of which was Malik Rahim, who is a former Black Panther, and his partner in the founding of On Common Ground was an FBI informant.
Wow.
And he said that he would never have suspected that his co-founder, and he's a Black Panther, he knows about COINTELPRO, and he would never have suspected that his co-founder was an FBI informant. So COINTELPRO is alive and well. Infiltration is alive and well. And then, of course, you have the agent provocateur. What does the agent provocateur do? That's the one who suggests that illegal, unethical, violent activity is engaged in so that then the state has an opportunity to respond in kind. So we know that that is a recipe for disaster. And what was found in Canada was that certain of the more violent members of the protests in Canada, I can't remember the exact protest, but probably was, maybe it was an anti-NAFTA or maybe it was an anti-trade.
It was the SPP in Montebello, Quebec.
And just by looking at the shoes that all of the agents provocateurs wore, certain very perspicacious individuals were able to sort out that these were government infiltrators. So infiltration exists, and we have to be aware of it and understand the role that they play. So we come to Charlottesville. Now, I'm from the South. I understand the South very well. And I have had to live with Confederate, neo-Confederate ideas for a long time. As a member of Congress for 12 years, 6 terms, I had to seek the votes of Confederates and neo-Confederates. So I understand this population and I understand this community very well. Now, what I don't understand is how all of the nationwide injustices can continue to exist without any reaction, basically, from, from certain folk. And yet we've got the creation of a, statue Taliban? That's pulling down statues, when real life injustice exists right within these very communities, right within these neighborhoods, and they go unchanged and unchallenged. That tells me something. So, we can engage in a real conversation, which is what I propose for hashtag UNRIG, or we can engage in a fake conversation that is, that is instigated and carried out, we're merely an audience for them, by two contending factions of the same forces.
Well, I think the conversation at this point is absolutely key. Being able to have an open and honest dialogue at this point, at this stage in the game, no matter what side of the political spectrum people are falling on, they seem to be incapable of being able to rationally discuss their ideologies with one another without descending into violence, and that certainly needs to change. As you said, there's, we have our share of provocateurs who, add fuel to the fire here and there, and that certainly has to be watched out for as well. And this is why we need the more transparency within government, essentially, which it takes us back to the whole point of hashtag UNRIG, and essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, you're seeking to reform the government from the inside and bring transparency back and put it back into the power of the hands of the people, right? Because people were looking for Trump to drain the swamp, and they're feeling a little disillusioned right now. So I think what we need is something similar to this platform, which is about transparency. Do you feel that's one of the more important things moving forward?
One of the things that I noticed in the Trump Phoenix rally was that people said, "Lock her up, lock her up, lock her up." And we haven't seen any movement there. We haven't seen any abatement of the drone strikes, the wars. In fact, POTUS Trump is quite different from candidate Trump, and we've got multiple tweets, we've got multiple quotes of candidate Trump, even non-candidate Trump, dating back to before he was even a candidate, talking about questioning the efficacy, not only the efficacy, but the morality of these endless wars. And now POTUS Trump is actually engaging these wars in exactly the same way that President Obama did. So more of the same. What we absolutely have to have is a change in the system. We've got to unrig the system. But here's the thing. One of those mechanisms of oppression of Paulo Freire is manipulation, and the other one that I mentioned was cultural invasion. And so we ourselves have to confront that we have been steeped in this culture of domination, this manipulation, this mental conquest, this stratagem of divide and rule. And so we've got to confront ourselves. That's one level, on one level, that hashtag UNRIG intends to work. And then we have to confront ourselves as a group, another level on which hashtag UNRIG intends to work. And then we have to, having done that, I believe we can engage in systemic, whole system, second order change. So if we are able to raise enough money, our original goal was to do one, I call them power cells. So we will form power cells in our goal originally, and this will be driven by the amount of money that we receive. But if we can receive enough, we ideally 435 power cells so that every congressional district is represented. If we can't do 435, then we would love to do 50. And we would have one for every state. Now, what is going to happen in the power cell is we will have certain activities that are planned on the individual level and on the group level. Those activities will include a kind of peacemaking process. And all of this is, sort of borne out in behavioral science. So this is like not something really bookish, but when you do it, but it's kind of bookish when you do the analysis, which I'll do after this is over. And so we hope to be able to attract 7 to 12 to 7 to 15 individuals to comprise one power cell. And they will self-identify from populist left, center right, populist right. And hopefully we'll be able to get at least one person from each of those self-identifications into one power cell. If we're able to, basically that's called a mirroring process, and if we are able to mirror the political spectrum as it exists across the United States as a whole in each of our power cells, and we will be very successful. Mm-hmm. And then we sit down and we discuss ideas that we have in common. So we're also going to utilize what's called appreciative inquiry, so that in the end we're appreciating each other and we're appreciating the changes that this confrontation, this experience that we've had, which I hope will be a very sort of uplifting, kind of spiritual engagement, because the fact of the matter is that we're involved in spiritual warfare. And so we've got to be boosted so that when we exit that room, not only are we spiritually boosted and ready for the fight, but that we also have an action plan. Mm-hmm. So we will come out with a series of actions, and we will do some of those actions on that very day. So this also is kind of borrowing from the experience of the Million Man March, where there were local organizing committees. And so what I would propose is that each power cell will become a local action committee. And once after having gone through the process, identified common problems and common solutions, then we're ready to go to work. Mm-hmm. And I believe that if we do this well, we not only will change ourselves and deprogram that divide and rule and the whole left-right nomenclature, but we can also deprogram or unrig our system and make it more responsive to the needs of all of us.
Awesome. Well, I couldn't think of a more exciting time to be involved with this. It seems like a historical period in time where we're almost like at a fork in the road, and it could go one way or it could go the other. And if you're just sitting on the sidelines, you know, you're gonna get left behind. We want to be the kind of people who can say to our grandchildren, we were on the right side of history when things were going down. So for people who are, you know, listening to this today and they're thinking, wow, this sounds like a really viable solution. This sounds like something I want to be involved in. How do they get involved? Where do they go to you know, find out how they can join with you guys?
Well, we are in the process now. Robert David Steele and I are in the process of putting together a schedule. And basically, if people want to participate, if they want us to come to their town, then they can send us an email at schedule@unrig.net and ask us to, you know, come to their town. We already have requests to come to certain towns, and so it's just a matter of what resources I have, what resources Robert David Steele has in a particular town. So if we know some people there, then we can come there, and I will have a limited amount of time. Now, we also need donations. We need people to contribute so we can stay on the road once we get on the road. So we've got an initial commitment for 10 days, but I have an open ticket. I'm coming back. And so if we can raise enough money so that I can stay on the road and stay here, because I do have a job and I have to go to work. So if we raise the funds, then I'm willing to stay. So if you're enthusiastic and you want to learn more, you can visit unrig.net, and you can also go to allthingscynthiamckinney.com, which is my website, and there is a tab that says #unrig. You can go there as well and learn more about UNRIG, and at unrig.net you can make contributions. We have 2 campaigns going. We have an Indiegogo campaign, which will provide funds for us as we are on the road and keep us rolling. And then we have a sort of a private channel to raise money, and it was through the private channel that we got the bus. So we have a bus, we have an RV, and so if you want to donate through the private channel, that will help me to stay on the road. If you want to donate through the public Indiegogo campaign, that will help us roll down the road. So there are many ways that people can help. And if you want us to come to your town, let us know through the website. And also, it would be helpful if you would also let us kind of know where on the political spectrum you are. So on my website, allthingscynthiamckinney.com, once we put a schedule in place, that's where I'm going to ask people to register for the power cell. And then in that registration, they will self-identify, so we'll know at each stop what kind of spread across the political spectrum we have.
Awesome. Very, very, very interesting, very innovative and exciting. So we will have the links in the description. I hope people can find the ability to donate. I can't think of a better person for the job, you know, to be out there on the road representing these people. So we will have links to those in the description. Everyone, please check them out and show your love and support for the great work Cynthia is doing. Once again, thank you so much for talking to us today, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, and I love Press for Truth.
All right.